the elephant in the room is, I'm not a speaker, it's nerve-wracking, I don't want to do this. So how do you get over that? After you've gotten over the jitters question, then we'll look at speaking styles, delivery, how you get organized, how you figure out what you want in your presentation, how to do that. How to figure out what your environment is. The environment for us is, we've got dancers tapping away. You've got to know that ahead of time before you're going to speak. So you want to ask for a microphone, for example. You also have to know the audience. Physically, the audience in the room. How do you do that? You then try to figure out what graphics you're going to use and how to use them effectively. Can you use PowerPoints effectively? I normally use something called Presentation Zen. This is way more words than you will see in any of the rest of my graphics, because I don't believe in using words in graphics. And then how to answer questions as well. Stupid questions, hostile questions, and other types of questions. And then how you do follow-up, which usually is just selling books. So, let's talk about jitters first. Everyone has them. When I was a stand-up, a lot of my colleagues, before they would go on stage, would go throw up. So if they were that nervous and polished and making cash money doing it, imagine what the rest of us are feeling. So, it's important to keep in mind, the audience came to hear you and to applaud for you. They want to get something out of this from you. So they want you to do great. That is true from all of you, right? I'm really nervous here. Okay. So sometimes you have to think, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? One thing is, crap, what's the next point? I can't think of what that is. So just take a breath, look down at your notes. People are used to people looking down at their notes. So do that. Don't worry about it. It feels like you're spending 5 hours trying to think of what that next thought is. It's not the case. The audience doesn't notice it. Materials don't arrive. Happens, alas, often enough, particularly if you're hoping to sell books. So make sure that you've got other types of handouts. Nancy has a big passel of what types of stuff do you use? You've got the little one sheets.
I have one sheets. I actually made a little trifold brochure. Was easy enough and not really expensive. Always have a business card or a bookmark. So things that you could pack easily in just a little bag. Because if your books don't show up, you still want to talk to people. And you want them to remember that, so you want to give them something.
Yeah, so I always have business cards with me, and you want to give them cool business cards. So
yeah, yours are cool.
A baseball card is cool. So don't worry about it if it doesn't show. The less stress you have on this type of thing, but think ahead of time what could go wrong. Briefing partner doesn't show. It happens, not from me, but it happens.
It didn't happen today, but.
So just keep in mind, what was my partner going to say, and try to go over some of that material as well, so that you've teed up your presentation. They're going to cut your time on you. We're going to hit 11 o'clock, but all of a sudden someone's going to run in from the front desk and say, you guys aren't supposed to be here, and suddenly I've got to pack up. So it happens. What are you going to do when suddenly you have to collapse it down to the elevator presentation? So there are all sorts of things that you can do to get around those issues of jitters. So what specifically are jitters, and what's that dread that you have? Sometimes you're going to have your extremities go cold on you. Your toes are going to go cold. You're not going to notice that, but you're going to notice that your fingers are going cold. Your heart is racing. And what your body is doing is saying, look, I'm in fight or flight. I don't want to be here. So all of a sudden, all of the blood goes to the major parts of your body and ignore the fingers and such. So you'll feel that. I've got a few techniques that's going to get around that physical reaction. We can also talk about the psychological reactions. But one thing that I do, just to warm up the crowd and warm me up, is I go around to everyone that I don't know and I shake hands with them ahead of time. It establishes a connection with them, and it gets some of that nervous energy off you. So consider it. One of my students was a black belt in karate and was just comfortable in that environment. So I would send her off to the women's room, and she would do 5 fast punches and a few high kicks, and then she was fine. She'd gotten all that extra energy off. If you know that type of technique, fine. Certainly look at the room. Before we came here, I showed up here at about 9:15 a day just to see what the room was like, and I was able to hear Kathy tapping away.
Nice.
It is useful to know what the room is going to be like, so you can see sight lines, hearing lines, etc. If you're looking up at the crowd, if the lighting's terrible, it just will give you a feeling of confidence that, okay, I can run this room physically. Can't hurt to smile as well. Smile is going to tell you, hey, I'm doing okay. And the audience will think, hey, he's doing okay. We don't know why, but he's doing okay. Certainly use that technique as well, that the audience is on your side, as I said before. And you feed off the audience's energy. I was talking to a couple of folks who really, really hate doing public speaking, except when they speak to a crowd of 2,000. It's much easier to talk to a crowd that large than it is to talk to a group this small. The reason for that is that there's always going to be 2 or 3 light bulbs in the crowd that are loving everything you have to say, think you were God's gift, so you just focus on them. And you aim your eye contact at those people. Everyone else in the crowd thinks that you're looking at them, so it works out just fine. So drag that energy with you. Always have note cards, no matter what, even if you are a great memorizer. At our age, you're going to forget stuff. So have them with you. It can't hurt to walk around as well, rather than stay at the podium, stay at the static microphone, keep moving around. Close your eyes, breathe. Now, don't do that during the presentation, but before the presentation, it can't hurt. Isometrics certainly help as well. You can just squeeze the chair or whatever, and again, get some of that energy off. Oddly enough, again, don't do this in front of a crowd, because if you look bored, they're probably going to take the hint. But yawn before you go on. That's going to get some of that energy out as well. And be conversational about it, as opposed to have highfalutin words. We know that you own a dictionary. We don't care. Some people like to listen to music before, I don't like this music, but before the crowd is warmed up. So you might bring whatever your favorite music is before you go on. And just think, I'm going to be good at this. I know more in this room than anyone else does. And when I walk out, everyone's going to know exactly what I know. So terrific. It's going to be a win-win here. So just use that nervous energy. That nervous energy is your friend. And you can use that to have better gestures, to walk around, to show enthusiasm. So jitters are actually a good thing to have. Look at speaking styles and delivery a bit. A lot of this doesn't affect you. It mostly is going to be Gen Z, Gen Ys. You've all heard of uptalk, in which you ask a question at the end of a declarative sentence. Nobody here does that, but when we go out on the road, we're going to hear that a lot. Same with vocal frying, which I can't mimic, but you've heard it before. You kind of have 16th notes or 32nd notes in each one of your words, and it sounds like you're just scraping your tongue on a word. You'll know it when you hear it. Kim Kardashian does it a lot. A lot of upper-class Brits do it. Don't do that. It's awful for the vocal cords. You get a lot of filler words as well. You know what I'm saying? That type of stuff. You guys don't do that, but again, we've got to fight that battle on the outside. Do not memorize your presentation. It's going to sound memorized, and when you forget, which invariably you will forget, Lamont shoes, suddenly you're going to sit there. Boy, I had a great line for you, and I just can't remember what it is. So don't memorize it. It's okay to have it on note cards, but again, you don't have to have the whole thing written down on note cards. It is okay to pause. People are trying to process the information that you're throwing at them, and it's okay to just stop every now and then, and for them to say, that's an interesting point. Okay, speaker boy, what else do you have? You don't need the crutch words either, you know? That type of thing might help some, but not others. So you don't need that, you don't need the weird inflections, etc. Oftentimes, particularly with Gen X's, you'll hear, so what sort of happened was, which kicks away the strength of your declarative sentence. This happened, dang it. This did not sort of happen. And certainly get rid of verbal graffiti, be it ums, ers, etc. The way to get rid of ums, ers, etc., just close your mouth. Which feels strange the first time you try it, and I almost got a spit take out of that, so I'll have to be careful.
You did.
And there are different types of verbal graffiti depending upon what country you're in. We and a lot. The Israelis a lot. Certainly slow down, particularly coming from Washington, where it's the height of intellect to be able to whip through a presentation. You don't have to do that, particularly with the types of crowds that you're going to be dealing with. Do not use jargon. You might be an expert in your field, the audience is not. So if you've got some really highfalutin, cool term, let them know what it is so that they're part of the cognoscenti. Don't use acronyms. If you've got to use one, make sure they understand it or tell them what it is immediately. An abbreviation is not an acronym, but let them know as well what that means. So all of you know what CIA means, right? Catholics in Action, great.
Culinary Institute of America.
Which oddly enough, our chef at the agency had attended.
I'm sure.
So don't use language as well. Just be straightforward. Try not to use a lot of foreign phrases, assuming that the crowd knows the 17 languages that you speak. So if you have to use it, like le mot juste, it means the correct word. Don't use F-bombs. We had a problem with our younger briefers who would brief a few directors who were more casual in their linguistic use and would F-bomb you every now and then. Just because you were among them doesn't mean that you were of them. And you don't have to give them a massive retaliation with profanity. Make sure that your pronunciation, your diction is correct, and try not to slur. Gestures and all that, reasonably useful to do, such as giving them vocal variety. Make sure that you've got ups and downs. Do not just monotone them to death. It's tricky to do, but you got to hear yourself do that. Make sure that they can hear you. Sally, you've been able to hear every word, right? Oh, God. Thank you. Which, again, battling this is not all that easy. So you're speaking from your diaphragm, and if you have a well-developed diaphragm the way I do, you're just great. You're not speaking from here. You are projecting. You are not yelling. Yelling is this, so it's up from here rather than from here. And again, just with practice, you get used to doing it. If a microphone is in the room, use it. It doesn't matter if it's even this size of a room, use it. Because projection eventually is going to just tire you out. Make sure your tempo is right for the room, the cadence is right, all of that. Make sure the pitch is right. Sometimes the tone is just a little grating. Watch your audience, you'll know when your tone's off. Certainly develop some kind of presence as well. You can develop presence just by getting away from the podium and establishing yourself in front of them. Got to have confidence to do this, and it develops over time. Make sure you've got eye contact. Have eye contact for pretty much 3 areas in the room, and everybody else in those regions will think that you're talking to them. Make sure your posture is correct. To the extent that you can when you're not moving around, try to position your heels so that they are square with your shoulders. And try to stand erect unless you have back trouble, which certainly happens with us. Try to have an open posture as well. I tend to not do this or not do this. Johnny Carson did this a lot. It worked for him. But by and large, it doesn't, because it's just trying to hide from the audience. So be open with gestures to the extent that you can. Make sure that your gestures aren't too open. A friend of mine started off briefing the president for her first day as president's daily briefer, and tended to have a long wingspan, as I do, and hit the president's coffee cup and anointed the president with boiling hot coffee onto his lapel area. Apparently the Secret Service does not take kindly to screams by the president caused by the new kid in the room. She went on to a great career at the agency, by the way, so not to worry. When in doubt, certainly dress for the room, but don't be really flamboyant and flashy. Know what is appropriate for that room. I normally wear a suit and tie, and I normally tone down the necktie, even though I've got the great collection. Which reminds you, by the way, those of you who go to Bartram Park Library, all of June, a month coming up real soon, they're going to have some of my necktie collection. 16 feet of it along their walls. So please stop by and sign the guest book. It's called Tie Into Reading. So how do you organize a presentation? Keep in mind whatever your purpose is. Is it to sell books? Is it to meet with people, develop new friends, develop new relationships? Whatever it is, keep that as your main focus. And figure out what your bottom line is up front. If all of a sudden someone is going to show up at the door saying, "Annie, we lied, get them out," you've got to have at least given them your one main thought before you run. That happened to me a couple of times. I was briefing a defense minister overseas and got the opening line out, and then the phone rings, and it's the president of that guy's country who said, "Get over here." So his choice is, listen to Ed, go see president. So I came in second. Give them a roadmap of where you're going, as I started you with all those words, so that they have an idea of, God, is this guy ever going to finish? At least they're not looking at that, but they know why you're building up to certain things. Practice out loud, not necessarily in front of a mirror, by the way. Mirror is just going to make you worry, geez, that's a really good-looking person I'm looking at. But practice it out loud so you've got the cadence right, you've got the tone right, you're getting used to using your diaphragm. That's far more important than how you look, at least to some of us. Memorize your opening. Do not look down at your notes saying, "Hi, my name's Nicholas, I'm going to be your speaker today." You can probably get that out. So, is that another spit take? Can you move over to... If you can, get a murder board. Congratulations, you are now my murder board. And I am essentially auditioning this presentation for Nancy to see if she wants to show up with me to this stuff or be embarrassed. Other things that you might consider doing. Number your note cards. At some point, they're going to fall down on the floor. Make sure you can figure out where in the world am I now. Use large font. You do not need to use 12-point Palatino or the size the New York Times uses. My fonts are about this big on the screen. Use that. Much easier to see quickly. How to know the environment, because stuff is going to go wrong on you. A few things to consider. Sight lines. Can they see you? It's a very simple thing. Can you see them? You want to be able to do that. So again, visit the room early on if you can, just for something like that. Make sure the sound is okay. Try the microphone out. Do not let them say to you, yeah, we've tried the sound system, it's just fine. You haven't tried it to my voice, and you haven't tried it to how I use a microphone. So we will do a sound check, won't we? Depending upon where you're going, find out about the security as well. Where's the local cop, where's the local guard, whatever. Sometimes you get nuts in the room and you want to be able to know what it is before you have to call 911 and wait 30 minutes for help to arrive. Sometimes they're going to ask you for credentials. Nancy, for example, even though I had dutifully called the gate guard, said, nope, she's not here. What do I do? Well, let's see. You can let her in, or you can shoot her. I'm leaning towards letting her in, but hey, your call. Make sure that stuff is compatible. Alas, my cables don't work with that, even though I was assured that they do. Check out the dress code. Dress for the culture. Normally I would be wearing jacket and tie, but you guys weren't going to show up for a schlub like me wearing jacket and tie, so okay, fine. I'll at least dress formally for Florida with a collared shirt. Hey. Don't wear stuff that is going to take their eye or their brain off your message by wearing, say, really cool earrings. As I invariably will focus on the earrings and say, you know, my wife collects earrings. I wonder where she got those. A lot of people are going to be wearing bling, and at the agency we used to have the number of pieces of bling that you may wear. Glasses count as one, a watch counts as one, this might count as one. So think about how much bling you are wearing in terms of the size as well as just numbers of bling. Try to limit that number if you can. Nancy is perfect.
It happens very rarely.
So, doing okay in the audition so far? Turn your phone off, period. You may remember Rudy Giuliani about 10 years ago. He was giving a presentation, and his phone rang.
His wife called.
And he took it. Don't do that. Because you're saying to the audience, I don't know who this is, but it's more important than you are. So not a message you want to offer. Avoid the wild patterns, even though that's a lovely outfit and makes a great tie. Think about seating as well. Can they see you easily enough? Can they hear you easily enough? Is their back going to be to you? Make sure you know who the principal in the audience is. A friend of mine was briefing an ambassador who was going out to his next country and focuses on this guy who's in a $3,000 Brioni suit, a wonderful tie, whatever, and said, so, Mr. Ambassador, I am delighted today to be able to speak to you. And the guy says, hold up, I appreciate that, but I am the ambassador's aide. This schlub next to me is the ambassador. So make sure you know who that individual is. How do you know the audience? How do you read a room? First, take a look at the size. Make sure you know what size crowd it is. Now, I've been to this room with this group often enough, and I know that I can count on 10 to 20 people tops. A friend of mine was told, so tomorrow we're going to have you talk to a few people in this service. And when you hear a few people, okay, yeah, maybe 10, 20, they open the door and there's this big old auditorium with 500 people staring down. Helps to know that ahead of time. It affects the way that you do projection, if nothing else. Figure out how you address people as well. That was really important at the agency. When you'd get a new director, they would say, so just call me Stinky or whatever works. Some want to be called judge, some want to be called director. Figure out how they address each other and use that. At the agency, for example, everybody in the federal government is an agent or a special agent, except for CIA people. If you call them agent so-and-so, you have just lost them. So even though we've got agency in our title, we're called officers, by the way, if that ever comes up. Or you can call me Stinky. Kinesins. Are they comfortable with shaking hands with you? If they are, by all means do it. It establishes some connection with them. Sometimes, though, a culture doesn't allow that, so be attentive to that. Room energy. Sometimes you've got it, sometimes you don't. When I'm hosting trivia here, there are some designated laughers in the room that are wonderful to have because they bring the energy of the crowd up. Be aware of any medical issues that might be in the audience, because you are effectively the chairman of the room and responsible for everything that's going on in that room at the time. And if someone all of a sudden has a stroke, they're looking to you for leadership. So make sure that you know where the AED is or something like that. Figure out what that audience wants out of you and give them that. Always be able to answer the what's in it for me question. Again, you're not trying to make them as brilliant on your topic of nuclear physics as you are. They're just trying to figure out, can the Iranians get the bomb tomorrow and is it coming over here? So make sure you know what they already know and what their institutional memory is. Every now and then we have to brief senators who know a lot of stuff at a broad area, but don't know it very deeply. So sometimes we would have to tell them, let's say, how the Haiti election is going. And if you start off with, so, in the 15th arrondissement, Carlo has 57% of this particular demographic. And you'll hear back from them, so Haiti, that's in the Caribbean, isn't it? So make sure you know what the audience is. You're not talking down to them, you're talking at their level that's most useful for them. Graphics. Do you use graphics at all in your presentations? It's useful. Question is, do you use them correctly? Or do you use them incorrectly? It's a lovely graphic, but I don't know that you'd use it except in this presentation. So, let's think about slides. Slides are not the same as notes pages. You'll notice that I haven't been reading the slides to you. Do any of you use PowerPoint? Quick show of hands. Okay, so there's something called notes pages that are down below that you can write whatever you feel like. And you can be, oh, so my next point is, but the crowd doesn't see that. So make sure you're using that rather than sticking everything you're about to say on the actual text of the slide. Handouts. If you need to use a handout, by all means, do. Handouts are not slides. Handouts can have a whole bunch of text. Slides should not. Handouts are what you would like them to take away with them. Oftentimes you'll find stuff left on the desk, but oh well. Sometimes you want to give them a read ahead. So you just leave stuff on their desk before you come up and chat with them. Sometimes you want to give them stuff that they're going to read right now. So you have to figure out, when do I give them stuff? It's an odd little niggling thing, but you have to be attentive to stuff like that. Are your slides real cluttered? There's a very famous look at what we were trying to do in Afghanistan, and it was about this detail. And that will explain why we were stuck there for so long. Is there something that's going to distract that's in your slide? Think about getting rid of that. Are you talking to the correct audience with that particular slide? Is there something that's going to trigger them? If so, pull it up. Make sure that they're able to just get the information they need off the slide. So be concise. There's no magic number for number of words that you can have on the slide, for number of slides that you have. For example, you'd probably be taken aback if I told you ahead of time, I'm going to hit you guys with over 100 slides when you came into the room today. But it's not burdensome when you notice how little I've got on each slide. I've got one idea, maybe a word or two, and we keep moving them along. Steve Jobs, when he was doing TED Talks, would do a 17-minute presentation with 300 slides. That's pretty much the record. What you're trying to do with each slide is give one message per slide, period, and move on. This uses a technique called Presentation Zen, which frankly is a life-changing book. It alters everything you think of and how you think graphically. If you get a chance and you need to give a presentation, by all means, check it out. And I will be happy to coach you on how to use Presentation Zen should you have a presentation coming up. Think about the fewest words you can possibly put on a slide and no more. Think about the images as well. Here's a few tools that you might use. Your book cover. By all means, get your book cover into your slide deck somehow. That's what you want them to leave with, preferably a copy of the book as well, signed with a check in your hand. Maps are always a useful thing. If you can throw them in for whatever reason, you do so. Charts and graphs. There's a difference in good graphs and chart jump graphs. Photographs are useful as well. Again, keep thinking visually for them rather than hitting them with a lot of words. It's because of the way our brains process information and images that you're doing this. Try not to be cluttered in your slides, of course. So, the reason that you don't read slides, oddly enough, our neurologists tell us that when you are reading something that's coming in a particular channel, and that channel translates the text into auditory. But if you also have people yakking at you, that's going in an auditory channel as well. And those two are hitting in your brain and clashing, and you can't pay attention to either of them. So you do not read your slides. Fonts are always fun. There are sans serifs, and there are serifed, those little squigglers at the bottom. Depending upon the individual, depends upon which one is more readable to them. Keep that in mind when you're putting these together. Do not shift between serifed and sans serif on the same slide. It just makes it really unreadable. Again, because you have to essentially click different gears in your head doing that. Try to figure out what an easy slide is to read. Joker Man is awful to read, as is this. Just because you have those 150 different fonts in Word doesn't mean you have to use them. The one at the top is the easiest one to read. The one at the bottom is really interesting, but nonetheless, you're taking a bit of time to process it. Again, this one's a bit difficult to read. Color is your friend if you use it correctly. You have to think about contrast. How many of you have watched television shows that are in Norwegian or Icelandic, and they're running a crawl at the bottom in English, and it's in Iceland, and it's a scene that's all snowy, and they've got white text on the bottom. It drives me nuts. I just go off to another Friends episode after that. Think about color blindness, particularly for if you have a lot of men. That's what color blindness looks like. So pick your colors accordingly. Stuff that you might not want to include. All sorts of stuff. People happily will put the logo of their company, or I live in Dell Web Ponte Vedra, this particular town or this particular club. You don't need that after you've shown it to them once. They know where they are now. So get rid of that. Similarly, you don't need 3D graphics like this is. Simple 2Ds are enough. All the rest is just taking your eye off the ball. You don't need the cool effects. It's neat that they're there, but you don't need them. You often see slides like this. You can't read them. It's just overwhelming you. You're doing your darndest to try to read it, and you're not paying attention to the words that the speaker is throwing at you. So don't do this. Typos will kill you. Always proof your work and hand it to somebody else who is really finicky. I am the most finicky person there is about it. Am I finicky? He just gave me his recent book, and I finickied it to death. And if it's not a word, it should be, dang it. Again, don't read them, and I showed you why. So a few simple tips. As few words as you can use. Work for Lincoln, they'll work for you. Only have one idea on that slide. Can they see it? If they can't, because you're using tiny fonts or a really complex graphic, change it. Think about whether you want to use a table or a graphic. Graphics are much easier to process quickly rather than a table. It means much more. Use that. Stuff that you want to also consider about what people attend to quickly so that you can move them through your presentation easily. Left to right, top down, big and little, bright colors versus dark, and think pictorial. Another way of saying use graphics rather than tough to understand concepts. Titles should be the same and in the same position on the slide, so if they're not looking around for where's the next title. You'll also note that I've been using the same font on all my titles and slides. Handouts are your friend if you use them right. The question for you again is, when do you give them out? When do you want to lose their eyes? Because you're going to lose their eyes. People can't stand having something in front of them and not reading it. So figure out when you want that to go out. Beforehand so they can read it, or during so you can illustrate a particular point, or just give them a lovely souvenir, thanks for coming. They are not your slides. Do not give your slides out. If I were to give you the 100 or so slides you've just seen, you'll say, boy, these are really pretty. I wonder what he said. So that's not what my handout was going to be. Other tech you might think about, microphones. Again, you're going to use them if you have them, but a few things to keep in mind. You don't tap on the thing, you don't blow into it. What is a microphone designed for? Your voice. All that you go anywhere near that microphone is your voice. Also, think about how you are aiming your words into the microphone. If you speak directly into it like this, you're going to have explosives, P's and such, which will pop into the microphone, and it's a little explosive. Instead, speak about like this. The microphone is still picking up your words, but it's not picking up that little breath of air. If If you do that, people will love you. And it's okay to change hands with the microphone as well, so that you can gesture. You don't gesture with the microphone because it does this. Zoom sessions. People are getting more and more used to using Zoom, but they're not necessarily using it correctly. Your camera tends to be up here rather than in the screen. So even though it's really tough, don't look at the screen. Look just up a little bit, and it looks to them like you're looking at them. Little trick. Also consider the background. People have all sorts of junk in the background. There's a way in Zoom that you can put any really cool background that you want as well. Again, don't let it divert attention. Video presentations, if you've got one of those, look at the red light in the camera. Look at the camera person who is behind it and talk to that individual. You're not talking to 3 million people. The largest crowd I ever had was, I think, 40 million. But again, if you talk to that one guy, you're going to be fine. Questions can be tricky. People, even though you might say, I prefer to hold questions till the end, don't do that. You've already lost half the audience. And they will ignore you anyway, so just, if a question pops up, answer it then. If you say, I'd like to hold the questions till the end, when they ask the question, you've just lost that person because they're now thinking, it's not there. Cherish the question that they just asked, answer it as concisely as you can, and move on. Then they are still going to be paying attention to you rather than trying to remember what their question was. If you temporarily blank, don't worry about it. You'll eventually get back to what your thought was. If you can't figure out and answer the question, say the most important thing that you can. I don't know. I'll get back to you on it. What saying I don't know means is not saying I'm not an expert in this field. It is saying everything that I've told you before, you can count on. But I'm not trying to snow you by giving you a flip answer to something. So you get the crowd back by essentially admitting defeat. Most important thing you can say. You'll get hostile questions, and you'll get really dumb, inarticulate questions. Nonetheless, treat the people with respect because you are not part of the audience. That idiot is part of the audience, and the audience is supporting that idiot. So make sure that you keep their respect by respecting them. Oftentimes you'll hear, that's a good question, which is a natural thing, and is trying to get about 2 seconds for you to think about a good answer. I usually will say, when I'm thrown, that's a good question. Yes, I thought it was 2. Now what's the answer? What you have said by that's a good question is all of the other dum-dums in this room have been asking me stupid questions. Thank God for you. So rather than saying the natural, that's a good question, you can say something like, we've been wrestling with just that issue, and here's what we've come up with. So you're bringing them into, hey, good job, gold star for you, without saying to the rest of the people, you guys are morons. Thank God this guy showed up. That make sense? Oh, good. Okay, stay on the topic. You're going to sometimes have to compete with recent events that are directly relevant to what you were doing. Acknowledge that that thing just happened. Weave it in if you have to, but again, keep to your message. Similarly, you're going to have other experts in the room who are going to be battling for you. Sometimes you're going to try to hijack by firing a question at you. Again, respect the audience, but nonetheless, give them a concise answer and then move on. Sometimes they'll try to go for tangential issues. Oh, look, a bird. Nonetheless, do what you can. Follow-up is important. Why did you show up to this meeting? Was it sell books? Great. Have that little old batch of books over there for you to sign. Make sure you've got a signing pen with you. Some pens are much better than others. You have your own favorite signing pen, right?
Absolutely.
So make sure you've got yours. Or if you want to make friends with somebody and maybe collaborate with them, make sure you've got a bunch of business cards so that they can contact you. Make sure you've got a pad of paper so you can write down their contact information. It went 50 minutes. All right. And for those of you curious, that was 160 slides.